Alexander Sterling stood at his office window in the Sterling Group's headquarters, watching the street performers in Central Park below. His father's words from that morning still echoed in his mind. "It's time you took your place as CEO, Alex. The board meeting next month will make it official." At 32, he was about to inherit one of New York's largest real estate empires, yet something felt hollow about it all. The autumn wind scattered golden leaves across the park as a haunting melody drifted up to his 45th floor sanctuary, a violin's song, so pure and melancholic it made his chest ache. Alex leaned closer to the window, trying to locate its source. There, near the Bethesda fountain, a young woman played her violin, her dark hair dancing in the breeze. Something about her music called to him, stirred memories he'd rather forget. It reminded him of his mother, Isabella, who had disappeared 15 years ago without a trace. The official story was that she died in a car accident, but they never found her body. His father, Richard Sterling, had forbidden any mention of her since then. Unable to resist the pull of the melody, Alex grabbed his coat and headed for the elevator. His assistant Margaret called after him about the afternoon meetings, but he waved her off. 5 minutes later, he emerged into the crisp October air, following the sound that seemed to weave through his very soul. The violinist's eyes were closed as she played, lost in her own world. A small crowd had gathered, mesmerized by the haunting tune. As Alex drew closer, he noticed her worn coat and scuffed boots, a stark contrast to the expensive instrument in her hands. The violin itself was exquisite, clearly valuable and old, with intricate carvings along its neck. When the song ended, the crowd dispersed, dropping bills into her open case. Alex remained, studying her face as she carefully wiped down her violin. There was something familiar about her features, something he couldn't quite place. "That was beautiful," he said, dropping a $100 bill into her case. "I've never heard that piece before." She looked up, and their eyes met. Hers were a striking amber color, unusual and captivating. "You wouldn't have," she replied with a small smile. "I composed it myself. It's called Isabella's Lament." Alex felt as if all the air had been sucked from his lungs. "Isabella," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the park's ambient noise. The violinist's smile faltered slightly. "Yes, it's dedicated to my mother." She extended her hand. "I'm Emma Lawrence." Alex took her hand, noting how cold her fingers were. "Alexander Sterling," he replied automatically, still reeling from the coincidence of the song's title. Emma's hand stiffened in his, and something flashed across her face. Recognition, fear, before she quickly withdrew it. "Sterling, as in Sterling Group?" Her voice had lost its warmth, taking on an edge he couldn't quite understand. "The same," he admitted, wondering why her demeanor had changed so dramatically. "Listen, would you like to get coffee? There's a cafe just across the street, and it's getting cold out here." Emma began packing up her violin with deliberate movements. "I don't think that would be appropriate, Mr. Sterling." She clicked the case shut with finality. "Thank you for your contribution, but I should go." "Wait," Alex called as she turned to leave. "Your song, about Isabella. Please, I need to know more about it." Emma paused, her back still to him. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Some melodies are better left unplayed, Mr. Sterling. Some truths are better left buried." With that, she melted into the crowd, leaving Alex standing alone by the fountain, clutching a business card he'd instinctively pulled from his pocket. That evening, sitting in his penthouse apartment with a glass of scotch, Alex couldn't shake the encounter from his mind. He'd spent hours searching online for Emma Lawrence violin and Isabella's Lament, but found nothing. The melody haunted him, as did Emma's reaction to his name. It was more than the usual recognition his family name carried. There had been fear in her eyes, and something else. Something that looked almost like hate. His phone buzzed with a text from his father. "Missed you at the office this afternoon. Don't forget dinner tomorrow night. Important matters to discuss before the board meeting." Alex stared at the message, his mind racing. Tomorrow night would be at his father's mansion. where his mother's presence had been methodically erased. No photographs remained, no personal items, nothing to suggest Isabella Sterling had ever lived there. His father had orchestrated the systematic removal of her memory with the same precision he applied to hostile takeovers. But that song today, Isabella's lament, it stirred something in Alex's gut. A suspicion he'd buried long ago, a doubt about the official story of his mother's death, and Emma Lawrence's reaction to his name. It couldn't be coincidence. His laptop chimed with an email notification, new message from an anonymous sender. The subject line made his blood run cold. The truth about Isabella Sterling. Alex's hand shook as he clicked to open it. Inside was a single sentence. Ask your father about the violin he buried with her empty coffin. What dark secrets lie behind the Sterling family's wealth? Stay until the end to discover the truth hidden in a violin's melody. The Sterling mansion loomed before Alex like a mausoleum as his car pulled through the iron gates. Snow had begun to fall, dusting the manicured gardens in white, making the Gothic revival architecture appear even more forbidding. He clutched his phone in his pocket, the anonymous email about his mother's violin burning in his mind. Inside, the house was warm but sterile, stripped of the warmth it had known during his mother's time. Richard Sterling waited in his study, a glass of bourbon in hand, looking more like a CEO than a father. At 65, he still cut an imposing figure, his silver hair perfectly styled, his posture rigid with authority. "You're late," Richard said, not looking up from his desk. "Traffic," Alex replied, though they both knew it was a lie. He'd spent the afternoon trying to track down Emma Lawrence, but she'd vanished as completely as his mother had 15 years ago. The street performers he'd questioned knew her only as the girl with the haunting violin. She appeared randomly, played her mysterious melodies, and disappeared. "Tomorrow's board meeting is crucial," Richard continued, finally looking up. "The voting members need to see unity in the Sterling family. No distractions, no complications." He emphasized the last word in a way that made Alex's skin crawl. "About that," Alex said, careful to keep his voice steady, "I've been thinking about Mom lately." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Richard's fingers tightened around his glass. "We've discussed this, Alexander. The past is the past." "Is it?" Alex pulled out his phone, pulled up the anonymous email. "Then explain this." Richard's face remained impassive as he read the message, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "Nonsense," he said too quickly. "Probably someone trying to stir up trouble before the succession." "What violin, Dad?" Alex pressed. "Mom's violin disappeared with her, but you never mentioned burying it." "Enough!" Richard slammed his glass down, bourbon sloshing onto expensive papers. "Your mother is dead. The violin is gone. Focus on what matters, the company, your future." But Alex had seen something in his father's eyes. Fear. "You know something," he said quietly. "All these years, you've known something about what really happened to her." Richard stood, his authority filling the room. "Go home, Alex. Get some rest. Tomorrow is too important for these childish conspiracies." Outside the study, Alex paused in the hallway, his heart pounding. The house felt different now, every shadow holding potential secrets. On impulse, he turned not toward the exit but toward the music room, a space that had been locked since his mother's disappearance. The key he'd stolen from his father's desk drawer 15 years ago still worked. Inside, sheets draped the furniture like ghosts. Dust motes danced in the beam of his phone's flashlight. The grand piano stood silent, but it was the empty violin stand in the corner that drew his attention. His mother had been a violinist before marrying into the Sterling family. She'd played with the New York Philharmonic, her talent praised in reviews Alex had found hidden in old newspapers. The violin she'd played, a priceless Stradivarius, had vanished with her. A violin that looked remarkably like the one Emma Lawrence had been playing in the park. Alex's phone buzzed, making him jump. Another anonymous email. "The truth lies in the music. Find the girl, find the song, but be careful. RS is watching." Movement caught his eye through the window. A figure stood in the garden below, barely visible through the falling snow. Even from this distance, he recognized Emma's silhouette. She raised her violin to her shoulder, and though the window blocked the sound, Alex could see her playing directly toward his mother's old music room. When he blinked, she was gone. The next morning dawned gray and cold. Alex sat in his office, watching snow blanket the city, unable to focus on the board meeting preparations. His assistant Margaret entered without knocking, something she hadn't done in 10 years of working for him. "Sir," she said, her face pale, "there's something you need to see." She handed him a folder. Inside was a newspaper clipping from 15 years ago. The headline read, "Virtuoso violinist dies in tragic accident." But it wasn't about his mother, it was about Sarah Lawrence, a rising star in the classical music world. The photo showed a woman with striking amber eyes, holding a violin with distinctive carvings along its neck. Emma's violin. The article mentioned a daughter, then 12 years old, who survived the crash. A daughter who had been in the car when it went off the same road where Isabella Sterling would allegedly die just 3 days later. "There's more," Margaret said softly. "I did some digging. Sarah Lawrence was your mother's protégée. They were working on a composition together, something called The Sterling Truth. It was supposed to debut the week both of them died." Alex's hands shook as he read further. The circumstances of both accidents were identical. Car failures on the same stretch of road. Bodies never recovered, too identical to be coincidence. His phone buzzed again. This time the message contained an audio file. Alex pressed play, and Emma's violin filled the room with a melody that made his blood freeze. It was his mother's composition, a piece he'd heard her practicing in secret during those final days. But as the song continued, it changed, becoming something else, something that sounded like code. The melody was mathematical, precise, a musical cipher. A knock at his office door made him jump. His father stood there, flanked by 2 security guards. "Son," Richard said, his voice cold as the snow outside, "I think it's time we had a real talk about your mother, and about Emma Lawrence." Behind Richard, one of the guards reached inside his jacket, and Alex caught the glint of something metallic. If this story is touching your heart, subscribe now to never miss our daily emotional stories. Hit that bell icon. Destiny has a way of bringing the right stories to those who need them most. Alex's fingers inched toward his phone's emergency button, but Richard's sharp voice stopped him. "That won't be necessary, son, though I suggest you listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you." The security guards positioned themselves by the door as Richard settled into one of the leather chairs facing Alex's desk. Outside, the snow fell harder, casting the office in an otherworldly gray light. The audio file still played softly from Alex's phone, its haunting melody filling the silence between them. "Turn that off," Richard commanded. When Alex complied, his father's expression softened slightly. "You're so much like her, you know, always digging, always questioning. Isabella never could leave well enough alone either. What did you do to her?" Alex's voice was barely a whisper. Richard's laugh was hollow. "Do to her? I loved your mother, Alex. Everything I did was to protect her, to protect all of us." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "But she and Sarah, they discovered something that could have destroyed everything we built." The envelope landed on Alex's desk with a soft thud. Inside were photographs, old Polaroids showing a much younger Richard Sterling, with a group of men Alex recognized from news stories about organized crime. They were standing in front of what looked like construction sites for early Sterling Group properties. The early days of Sterling Group weren't exactly legitimate, Richard continued. "We needed funding, connections. Certain arrangements were made. Your grandfather was desperate to build his empire, and I was desperate to prove myself worthy of it. Money laundering," Alex said, the pieces clicking into place. "The properties were used to clean mob money," Richard nodded. "Among other things, by the time I took over, we were too deep to ever get out. The legitimate business grew, but the foundation," he gestured to the photos. Your mother was an artist, but she was also brilliant with numbers. She and Sarah Lawrence were investigating discrepancies in the company's historical records for a book they were writing about the Sterling Group's rise to power. The musical cipher, Alex realized. They encoded what they found in the composition. Sarah figured it out first, Richard said, his voice growing distant. She came to me, tried to blackmail the company, said she'd expose everything unless we paid her enough to ensure her daughter's future. He closed his eyes. I didn't order her death, Alex. I simply told certain people about her threats. They handled it their way. Horror crept up Alex's spine. And Mom, Isabella knew. Somehow she knew what had happened to Sarah. She started acting erratically, saying she had evidence, that she'd hidden proof of everything. Richard's hands trembled slightly. I tried to reason with her, but she wouldn't listen. The night she disappeared, she told me she was going to play the composition at a public concert. Expose everything. So you had her killed too? Alex's voice cracked. No! Richard's outburst was sudden, anguished. I loved her. I tried to stop her, to explain how dangerous these people were. She wouldn't listen. She got in her car, said she was going to Sarah's daughter, that Emma would help her finish what they started. He took a shuddering breath. The brake lines were cut before she left the garage. I found out too late to stop her. Alex felt sick. You knew. All these years, you knew who killed her. I protected you, Richard insisted. If you'd known the truth, you might have done something rash. These people don't just go away, Alex. They're still tied to our business, buried so deep it would take down half of New York's real estate market to root them out. The violin, Alex said, the one in the empty coffin. A warning. They took her violin, her actual one, as proof. Richard's face hardened. But now this girl, Emma, she has her mother's violin. And she's playing that damn song in public, drawing attention. They're watching, Alex. They've always been watching. As if to emphasize his point, Alex's phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Central Park West, 20 minutes. Bring what you found in the music room. Richard saw the message and went pale. You went in there? What did you find? But Alex's mind was racing ahead. The empty violin stand in the music room. He'd been wrong about its significance. It wasn't about the violin at all, but what was hidden inside it. His mother had always kept her most precious things in that hollow space beneath the stand. I have to go, Alex said, standing. Richard grabbed his arm. You don't understand. These people, they won't hesitate to... To what, Dad? Kill me like they killed Mom? Like they killed Sarah Lawrence? Alex pulled free. I'm not hiding anymore. He headed for the door, but his father's next words stopped him cold. Emma Lawrence is dead, Alex. Alex turned slowly. What? The real Emma Lawrence died in the crash with her mother. Whoever this girl is. Richard's eyes were wide with genuine fear. She's not who you think she is. A flash of movement caught Alex's eye. Through his office window, he saw a familiar figure standing on the rooftop of the building across the street. Emma, or whoever she was, raised her violin once more. Even through the glass and snow, Alex could see her smile. She began to play. Behind him, both security guards suddenly drew their weapons, not at Alex, but at Richard. His father's face crumpled in recognition. Hello, Richard, said a voice from the doorway. It's been a long time. Alex turned to see a woman he'd only known from photographs, her dark hair now streaked with silver, her amber eyes just like Emma's. She looked older, harder, but unmistakably alive. Isabella, Richard whispered. Standing next to his supposedly dead mother was Emma, her violin now lowered. Her face a mask of cold satisfaction. Hello, brother, she said to Alex. I think it's time you learned the rest of our family's story. Are you feeling the intensity? Hit like if you're on the edge of your seat. Your support helps us share more powerful stories like this one. The snow continued to fall outside the Sterling Group tower, but inside Alex's office, time seemed frozen. Isabella Sterling stood in the doorway, 15 years older but somehow stronger, her presence commanding the room just as it had when Alex was a child. The security guards, Clearly her men, not his father's, maintained their aim at Richard, who had sunk deeper into his chair, face ashen. "Brother," Alex repeated, looking at Emma. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Isabella moved further into the office, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Your father wasn't entirely wrong about one thing, Alex. The real Emma Lawrence did die that night, along with her mother, Sarah." She paused, her eyes filled with years of pain. But he forgot to mention one crucial detail. Sarah was pregnant when they killed her. Richard's head snapped up. "That's impossible, is it?" Isabella's laugh was bitter. "You weren't the only one with secrets. Richard, Sarah and I, we were more than just musical collaborators. She carried my child, a child conceived through a donor who shared your DNA, Richard. A child who would have had a legitimate claim to the sterling fortune." Alex's mind reeled. "Emma is your sister," Isabella confirmed. "My daughter with Sarah Lawrence. When I discovered what Richard's associates had planned for Sarah, I tried to warn her. I was too late to save her, but I managed to save the baby." She reached for Emma's hand. "We've been in hiding ever since, waiting, planning, gathering evidence." Emma, or whatever her real name was, kept her eyes fixed on Richard. "Mother raised me on the run. We changed identities, moved constantly, but she made sure I never forgot who I was or what was taken from us." She lifted her violin. "This was Sarah's. Every time I play it, I honor her memory." "The musical cipher," Alex said, understanding dawning. "It wasn't just evidence of the money laundering. It was proof of Emma's existence." Isabella nodded. "Sarah was brilliant. She encoded everything. DNA test results, bank records, proof of Richard's criminal connections, all hidden in a composition that only someone with her specific musical training could decode." She smiled at Emma. "Training I made sure our daughter received." Richard surged to his feet, despite the guns trained on him. "You're lying. This is an elaborate con. You can't expect anyone to believe—" "Sit down, Richard," came a new voice from the doorway. Margaret, Alex's assistant, entered holding a tablet. "The DNA results just came back. Emma's sample matches both Isabella's and the Sterling genetic profile." She gave Alex an apologetic look. "I've been working with your mother for years, sir. We've been gathering evidence, building a case." Alex stared at his trusted assistant of 10 years. "You knew? All this time?" "We needed someone on the inside," Isabella explained. "Someone to watch over you, make sure you were safe. Margaret was an old friend from my orchestra days. She helped me escape the night of the accident." The pieces were falling into place, but one thing still didn't make sense. Alex turned to Emma. "Why reveal yourself now? Why the public performances? The mysterious emails?" Emma's face softened slightly. "Because of you, brother. Mother wanted to come forward years ago, but I insisted on waiting. I needed to know what kind of man you were, if you were like him," she gestured to Richard, "or if you had her heart." "The board meeting tomorrow," Isabella added. "With the evidence we've gathered and Emma's claim to the sterling fortune, we can finally expose everything. The old guard will be ousted and the criminal elements purged from the company." Richard laughed suddenly, a harsh sound that made everyone tense. "You really think it's that simple? That you can just walk in and take everything I've built?" He pulled out his phone. "One call, and certain people will know exactly where to find you." "Isabella, you too, Emma. How long do you think you'll survive this time?" "That won't be necessary, Mr. Sterling," said another voice. Agent Sarah Chen of the FBI stepped into the increasingly crowded office, flanked by more agents. "We have everything we need. Your associates have already been arrested in coordinated raids across the city." Richard's phone clattered to the floor. "What? Did you really think I'd come out of hiding without protection?" Isabella asked softly. "The FBI has been building this case for years. Every concert Emma performed, every public appearance was monitored. We needed you to reveal yourself, to confirm what we already knew about who was really responsible for Sarah's death." The FBI agents moved to handcuff Richard, who seemed to have aged decades in minutes. As they led him toward the door, he looked back at Alex. "Son, please." Everything I did was to protect our legacy. Alex stood, moving to stand between his mother and newfound sister. No, Dad. Everything you did was to protect yourself. But as Richard was led away, Emma suddenly stiffened. Her eyes went wide as she looked out the window. Mother, she whispered, they're here. Through the swirling snow, dark figures were emerging on the surrounding rooftops. Isabella's face went pale. Agent Chen, we need to move. Now. They're not all in custody. Who? Alex asked, though he already knew the answer. The ones who actually killed Sarah, Emma said grimly, gripping her violin like a shield. The ones who've been hunting us all these years. The real power behind Sterling Group's criminal enterprises. A single shot shattered the office window, sending everyone diving for cover. As glass rained down around them, Emma began to play. Not the cipher melody this time, but something else, something that made Alex's blood run cold with recognition. It was their mother's final composition, the one she'd been working on the night she disappeared. But now, as danger closed in from all sides, Alex finally understood what the music had been trying to tell them all along. The truth about the Sterling family was about to cost them everything, or save them all. This story is about to reach its climax. Subscribe now and join our community of story lovers. Together, we keep these powerful narratives alive. Glass crunched under Alex's shoes as he crawled toward Emma, who hadn't stopped playing despite the chaos erupting around them. FBI agents took defensive positions, their weapons trained on the broken window. Snow swirled into the office, the winter wind carrying Emma's melody out into the darkness where their hunters waited. "We need to move," Agent Chen commanded. But Isabella raised her hand. "Wait," she said, her eyes fixed on Emma. "Listen to the music." Alex did listen, really listen, and suddenly he understood. The composition wasn't just music, it was a message. The same mathematical precision he'd noticed before was there, but this time it wasn't encoding secrets. It was coordinates, directions, a map written in sound. "The old concert hall," he whispered. "Mom's private practice room in the basement. That's what this piece is about, isn't it?" Isabella's eyes shone with pride. "Sarah and I didn't just hide evidence in the music. We hid escape routes, safe passages. This city's full of forgotten spaces, underground tunnels, old maintenance corridors. We mapped them all, knowing we might need them someday." Another shot rang out, closer this time. Agent Chen spoke urgently into her radio, coordinating with teams outside. Multiple hostiles on surrounding buildings. "They're closing in. The concert hall connects to the old subway maintenance tunnels," Isabella explained quickly. "We can get out through there, but we need to move now." Emma's playing grew more intense, her bow flying across the strings as she wove their escape route into sound. Alex watched his sister in amazement, seeing in her both his mothers. Isabella's strength and Sarah's artistry combined into something extraordinary. "Your assistant, Margaret," Alex remembered suddenly. "Where is she?" "Setting things in motion," Isabella said with a grim smile. "All those years, organizing your schedule, she was also organizing this moment. By now, every major news outlet has received copies of our evidence. The FBI has their warrants. Even if these people get to us, the truth about Sterling Group can't be buried anymore." A burst of gunfire shattered more windows. Agent Chen and her team returned fire, providing cover as Isabella led Alex and Emma toward the emergency stairwell. Emma finally stopped playing, carefully placing her mother's violin in its case. 15 floors down, there's a maintenance door that leads to the old service tunnels, Isabella explained as they descended. "From there, we can reach the concert hall underground." "Why are they still coming after us?" Alex asked between breaths. "The FBI has the evidence. Richard's in custody. It's over." "Because it's not just about the money laundering anymore," Emma replied, her voice tight. "These people, they've built an empire in the shadows of companies like Sterling Group. If we expose them here, their entire network falls." They reached the maintenance door. Rusted with age, but still solid. Isabella pulled out a key she'd kept hidden for 15 years. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit echoed in the stairwell. The door opened to reveal a dark tunnel, decades of dust covering the floor, except for a single line of fresh footprints, Margaret's. They followed her trail, the only light coming from their phones, the air thick with history and secrets. "I remember when you used to practice down here," Alex said to Isabella as they moved through the darkness. "I never understood why you chose this place over our music room at home." "Because this was real," Isabella replied softly. "Everything in that mansion was for show. The perfect wife, the perfect family. But down here in these forgotten spaces, I could be myself." Sarah understood that. It's why we fell in love. Emma touched the tunnel wall, her fingers coming away with dust. "You really loved her, didn't you? Sarah wasn't just part of your escape plan. Sarah was everything." Isabella's voice cracked. "When I found out she was carrying you, it gave me the courage to finally stand up to Richard, to the life I was trapped in. I waited too long to act." They emerged into the old concert hall basement, the space exactly as Isabella had left it 15 years ago. Her music stand still stood in the corner, sheet music yellowed with age scattered across the floor. Margaret was waiting for them, along with more FBI agents. On a table lay files, hard drives, and a single USB drive shaped like a violin. "Everything's in place," Margaret reported. "The evidence is being released in waves. Social media's already picking up the story. Richard's associates are being arrested across the city." A crash echoed from the tunnel behind them. Their pursuers had found the maintenance door. Agent Chen and her team took up defensive positions while Isabella rushed to the table, grabbing the USB drive. "All the proof, everything Sarah and I discovered. It's backed up here," she said, pressing it into Alex's hand. "The original copies were hidden in her violin. That's why they took it that night. But they never knew we'd made duplicates." "It's not just evidence," Emma added. "It's our story, Sarah's story. The truth about everything they tried to bury." Heavy footsteps approached from the tunnel. Agent Chen signaled her team to ready themselves, but Isabella wasn't done. "Alex," she said urgently, "if anything happens to me or Emma, the Sterling Group is yours. Use it to make things right. Use it to honor Sarah's memory." "Nothing's going to happen," Alex insisted, but Emma stepped forward, pressing her violin case into his hands. "Keep it safe," she said. "It's not just a violin, it's our legacy. Sarah's artistry, Mother's courage, all the truth and love they fought to protect." The footsteps grew closer. Agent Chen's team aimed their weapons at the tunnel entrance. But before the confrontation could begin, music started playing from hidden speakers throughout the basement. The same melody Emma had performed in the park, but different somehow, fuller. "Sarah's final performance," Isabella breathed, "the one they killed her to prevent." The music grew louder, and with it came Margaret's voice over the concert hall's old PA system, broadcasting to the whole building and, through connected feeds, to the world. "Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our regular programming to bring you the truth about the Sterling Group." As Sarah's music filled the space, telling its story of love, betrayal, and secrets through mathematics and melody, their pursuers found themselves trapped, not just by the FBI agents emerging from hidden positions throughout the building, but by the truth itself, finally set free after 15 years. Hours later, as dawn broke over New York, Alex sat with his mother and sister in a safe house, watching the news unfold on multiple screens. The arrests, the exposures, the fall of an empire built on lies. It all felt surreal. Emma had taken out her violin again, playing softly. Not Sarah's complex codes now, but simple lullabies she'd learned from both her mothers. Isabella leaned against Alex's shoulder, finally allowing herself to relax. "What happens now?" Alex asked. "Now," Isabella said, watching Emma play with tears in her eyes. "We rebuild, not just the company but our family, the right way this time." Emma lowered her violin, looking at her brother with a tentative smile. "Think New York's ready for a CEO who moonlights as a street musician?" Alex laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. "They better be," Because the Sterling Group's new board chair, he smiled at Isabella, is coming out of retirement to teach us both how to run things properly. Isabella took both their hands in hers. Sarah would be so proud of you both. She always said music had the power to reveal truth, to heal wounds, to bring people together. It brought us together, Emma said softly, all of us. Outside, the snow had stopped falling. A new day was beginning, not just for the Sterling family, but for all the lives their truth would touch. The melody of their story would play on, no longer a secret cipher, but a symphony of justice, redemption, and love. And somewhere in the eternal music of memory, Sarah Lawrence was smiling, knowing her final composition had finally found its perfect audience. What would you have done in Alex's position? Chosen family loyalty or pursued the truth? Share your thoughts below. If you could play one melody that revealed your life's truth, what story would it tell? Let us know in the comments. If this story moved you, remember to hit like and subscribe. And speaking of powerful revelations, you won't want to miss what's coming up next. Look to your left. That story will take you on another unforgettable journey of love, truth,